Good morning. It is November 6th, I think, something like that. And I'm just sat here in the morning with my morning cup of coffee. We have had quite a lot of our autumnal rain, and then also daylight savings time began yesterday morning early. So welcome back to the weird Pacific Northwest lighting. But yeah, and welcome again to the November reading vlog. So if you are new to this channel, hello. My name is Anna. I use she, they pronouns, and I mostly vlog about the things that I read and also post VODs of the video games that I stream over on Twitch. So that's what this channel is all about. Mostly books, but just stories more generally speaking too. And I just wanted to set some of the scene and some expectations for the November reading vlog of what this is going to be. I say this now that it might be on the shorter end just because I'll be traveling at the tail end of the month for the Thanksgiving holiday in the US, but you never know. It could still wind up being 40 minutes like last month's reading vlog, which was kind of nuts when you think about it. And then this month I am trying to read very intentionally for Native American Heritage Month, which is in the United States. So this is when Indigathon used to happen, and I still kind of keep the tradition of reading and focusing reading books by Indigenous authors during the month of November. So I have a few that I've picked out from the library, and then most of what I want to read is actually the Sherry DeMoulin back catalog. So Hunting by Stars, which is her sequel to The Marrow Thieves, I've talked about that a bunch on this channel, is one of my books I need to read by the end of the year. So I'm going to start with that, but I also have a bunch more of her books out from the library, and I have a few others, mixture of some middle grade, some short stories, some young adult, some adult. And I think I also found a memoir, but I can't remember the title of it off the top of my head, so I will have to share that with you in a little bit. So that's kind of what my plans and intentions are for reading for the month of November. Again, there's going to be a lot of traveling that happens this month for me, so we'll see how well that winds up working out with the travel schedule and everything. And right now, I haven't really done too much reading this month so far. I guess two things. So one, I'm continuing to read The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, which is a romance story that I started last month. And I also started rereading the comic series Descender by Jeff Lemire, which is one of my favorite comic series of all time. So I will share a few more thoughts on that when I actually have it to hold up with me, but I heartily recommend it still. It was, for a book that is so dark in terms of its subject matter, and it can be very heavy, it is a book that gives me a great amount of joy to read. And it has inspired some of my favorite storytelling moments that I've gotten to play out, most recently in a tabletop RPG campaign that came to an end after 46 sessions, almost 3 years of playing together. So this is obviously a series that is very important to me outside of just enjoying it as a book. It's something that has inspired a lot of other aspects of storytelling that I like. So go check it out if you haven't. It's wonderful. And then I'm also reading the new Witch Hat Atelier Kitchen, which is a spin-off of a manga that I'm reading, Witch Hat Atelier. It's fine. It's just kind of cute, slice of life comics that include recipes. I didn't know what to expect from this as a spin-off, but it's pretty much exactly what you think it is. It's them talking about, some of their decompression at the end of a long day and then sitting down to make recipes. So it's cute. And I will keep you posted on my next sets of reading and also some other just cool things that I find. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to mention too is that for the month of December, I haven't decided yet if I'm going to wind up doing a regular reading vlog for that, because that's also when I would normally do Vlognica, which is vlogging for all of the 8 nights of Hanukkah. And we got that idea on this channel from Hannah Witten, who is the first person that I saw do it. I don't know if she's the creator, but she's the first. So in my mind, there you go. So the December reading vlog will probably look a little bit different because of that, and because if I am able to actually vlog and upload daily, that would be rad. So I will check back in a bit. Hey everyone, it is Tuesday, November 7th right now, and I'm checking back in again to share a couple of updates. First among them, that it is my book birthday. My most recent tabletop RPG has been published and released today, and this is Fever Nights, a classic console RPG inspired tabletop role-playing game. Our tagline is to go on an adventure in a 90s retro world that never was, and I was one of the quest designers on this, as well as somebody that did a lot of writing for the world building and character progression. So I'm just really excited. I'll give you a little bit of a sneak peek of what the inside of this looks like. So we start off with this gorgeous map, and all of the artwork and characters were created by Adam Ellis, who's a cartoonist and author. We worked together with him to help bring this comic that he wrote to life, and I'm just really thrilled that it's finally actually out in its book form. We have a bunch of really cool different JRPG style character class options that you can choose to play as. And this is like, I think, a really good RPG if you want it to be like your first RPG and you're a fan of video games, or maybe if you want to play with, like, this is a good approachable one for younger players, maybe like middle school to teen and up. Just because the way that it's structured and organized, I think, is a lot more straightforward than some other RPGs that I've worked on. Look at these really cool guys over here. So I'm absolutely thrilled that this book is actually out in the world. It's available for sale now wherever you get your books or your games, so friendly neighborhood game store. Maybe you have a bookstore in your town that has it, and you can, of course, buy it online as well. I'll leave a link in the description box down below. But it would mean the world to me if you do pick this up and you play it. Please let me know what you think of it. Share it with your friends, your family, anybody else that you think might be interested in getting to play this type of RPG. This one's going on my sort of bookshelf shrine area where I put my new releases. And look, it's even got this beautiful like teal ribbon bookmark. Gotta love a good ribbon bookmark. So yeah. Really excited for that. And then we have a couple other book birthdays that we are celebrating today. This next book birthday, I think, will probably need no introduction for the people that watch this channel, but it's Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree, which is the highly anticipated second book from the author of Legends and Lattes. Now, I really enjoyed reading Legends and Lattes when it came out. I had like the original, I guess more like self-published copy of the book that didn't even include the short story in the back. And then I gave it away to a friend who I thought needed a literary hug. And now I'm just like, ugh, why did I give away my original one? But it's okay because I wound up getting another copy of the book and I cannot wait to read this. This is about a young orc named Viv who is wounded after a battle with a necromancer gone wrong with her mercenary company, and she gets packed off to recuperate to a sleepy little town where she begins a job as an unlikely bookseller. I am a sucker for a good story set in a bookshop or anything like that, as you know. Can't wait to read this. I think, honestly, I might bring this when I go travel home for the Thanksgiving holiday to visit my family, just because this is the kind of thing that you want to have around and reading when you're just stuck in an airport or stuck, you know, doing transportation between places. And the final book birthday we are celebrating today is a massive congratulations. This is Dolls of Our Lives, Why We Can't Quit American Girl by Mary Mahoney and Allison Horrocks. They are both the co-hosts of the Dolls of Our Lives podcast. That's a podcast where they relive the American Girl series book by book, which, if you are unfamiliar, is a set of children's books that began publication in the 80s and are still going now, albeit under a different direction, that are basically like historical fiction stories for young girls about different points in American history, and they have accompanying dolls that went with them. I feel like if you are my age, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger, and you grew up in the US, it's impossible to avoid interacting with this brand in some way, shape, or form. And these are two women who are friends, who are historians, and their podcast is amazing. I actually started listening to the podcast almost a year ago at this point. I think I discovered it, about a year ago, because I got sick with COVID last winter, and I was just laying in bed because you're not supposed to like do anything to exert yourself so that you can, rest and recover. And I just put on and listened to a bunch of these episodes back to back. Absolutely loved them, and I'm all in for this book. I know that the audiobook is narrated by both of them. To be perfectly honest, I might also just like get the audiobook. And I know that they're not going to be coming closer to here for a book event. I wish that they would though, and it would be really awesome if maybe by chance I get to travel over towards the East Coast and like at the same time as they're doing a book event, because it would be really awesome to meet them in real life. So I'd say if you're interested at all in that, like doll culture, kids historical fiction, the nostalgia of it, check out their podcast and definitely give the book a read. I'm probably going to crack into this tonight. And this is like a book related thing. It's not a book birthday, but I just recently got a new pen and pencil set. This was a deal that was on like Amazon where you could get a bunch of like pencil sets and a highlighter that are all color coordinated. And I think this cost me like $5. So I've been looking for kind of a uniform way to annotate certain things and a couple different types of pens that aren't going to smear everywhere. So I think this is gonna be exciting to try out. They are all gel pens, mostly black and then one purple, and then 2 highlighters, 1 retractable and 1 soft in different shades of purple. I'm really looking forward to doing this. And let me share with you in my next update a couple of the books that I've been reading for Native American Heritage Month. Right now, I have already finished one book, which is called Res Dogs. I will talk about that in the next little snippet. And then I am currently reading Love Beyond Body, Space, and Time, which is a sci-fi fantasy anthology, like short fiction and poetry anthology, and then also Into the Bright Open, which is a Secret Garden retelling by Sherry Dibbleen. So I will check back in a little bit and tell you more about those books. Hello, you have caught me right in the middle of getting ready for my friend's Diwali party later today. I am painting my nails, which you can't actually really see, but it's gonna be this kind of greenish color when they're done. And I wanted to get that done. Oops, get my makeup bag out of the way. Get that done and have these be on their way towards drying before we leave for that. Also, apologies for the weird angle, but I'm sitting on a chair that's slightly elevated above this. So while they're drying and I'm waiting to put on the second coat, I thought I would check in and talk a little bit about the books that I have finished so far. So we finished 4 books so far. 3 of them were part of my plan to read for Native American Heritage Month this month. And, excuse me, I just had coffee too, so my vocal cords are covered in milk. So yeah, some of these were part of my plans to read for Native American Heritage Month, and a lot of them I just picked up from my library's display, but some of them I intentionally went out of my way to seek out. So the first one was a random pickup from the display, and that was Res Dogs by Joseph Baruchak. This is I would say middle grade novel for young readers that is written in verse, and it tells the story of Malian, who is a girl that is doing shelter in place during the COVID-19 pandemic with her grandparents on their reservation. And the story begins with this dog, Malsum, arriving at their house. And it's really a book that is a lot about the stories that we tell and the traditions that we carry, and how stories are a means of carrying culture around throughout the years and also across different cultures. I thought that this was a really exceptional book. I'd highly recommend it for young readers in your life. It does deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, but I would say it doesn't really go into any sort of graphic detail. The only really they talk about the COVID-19 pandemic. They talk about how indigenous communities are the ones that are very negatively impacted by this pandemic and by the lack of governmental response and outreach. And then she talks about, you know, missing her parents and stuff who live in the city. But as far as like depictions of sickness and death and everything, like that's going on in the world, but it's happening off page. So I think that this was a really fantastic book. I did not know that this author writes a lot of Indigenous literature for young readers, but I'll probably check out some of his other books. He's written a lot of fiction and nonfiction. So there's that. I also finished reading Love Beyond Body, Space, and Time, which is an anthology of LGBTQ plus Indigenous authors, kind of told in like a science fiction-y area. And I feel like with a lot of short story collections, particularly sci-fi story collections, you know, it's always going to be a little bit hit or miss. Some of the stories are going to be good, some of them are not as strong. And when it's an anthology, one of the things that kind of frustrates me sometimes about reading them is just that you never really get to spend enough time with those characters or with the world as it is being developed, because it's an anthology and there's not time to go into everything. I mean, like, this book is just over 100 pages long. So this is one of those books where, like, I'm very glad that it exists and this was edited together. But this just wasn't like really the book for me. There were a couple stories in here that I think are going to stick with me now that I've finished the book, but by and large, I don't think that like this is going to be one that I'm like, yes, this was amazing. It totally blew my mind. But you never know. Sometimes I read like a short story in an anthology that I think was just okay, and then I go read that author's other work and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I'm so glad I get like more of your writing. So we shall see. One of the authors that was in the anthology that I already did know about was Sherry Dimeline. And I think I mentioned this earlier, that I was reading a Secret Garden remix by her. It's called Into the Bright Open. And this is part of a young adult series that is retelling a lot of works of classical literature, frequently with LGBT plus characters at the forefront of it, and also characters who aren't white centered and at the forefront of it. So in this case, with Sherry Dimeline being Indigenous herself, a lot of the characters in this book are also Indigenous. In Canada, it was the Georgian Bay tribe that she is a member of. And like I said, this was a retelling of The Secret Garden. And I thought that this book was just okay, but I say that recognizing that I'm not really the target audience for this. Like, this is a book for teenagers, and I think that it's going to be a lot more meaningful for them at that stage of their life than it is for me where I'm at in my life right now. So the book was fine. It was just difficult because a lot of the things that I really liked about this book felt like they were coming up against or like creating friction with the need that she had to adapt this from The Secret Garden. So there would be times when the story would go in one direction and I'm like, yes, please keep following that. But then she'd have to like veer back and return to the Secret Garden plot elements. And don't get me wrong, I do love the book The Secret Garden and I'm always here for queering classics. It's just that I feel like they didn't. I think that if this was less based in The Secret Garden than it even was, it would have maybe been a better story. Like, it would have been a stronger plot. But yeah, that was just my thoughts on it. By the end of it, I was like, yeah, this book really isn't for me. Another thing that was tricky about this is that The Secret Garden is literally a book that was written in the early 20th century for children, and the main characters are like between the ages of 10 and 12. This is a book that's written now ostensibly for teenagers, but knowing that a lot of the demographic that reads YA is adults, and all the characters are 15 and up. So the stakes and the kind of character development is already completely different, because you take a book where the main characters are children and they're very much concerned with a lot of like age appropriate for kids things, and then you age them up to teenagers and suddenly, like, it's not that the characters in the original didn't deal with some pretty upsetting and traumatic things, but in this, it's like they're older, and so there's like a greater awareness of this. And yeah, I just don't know that it then worked out so great as an adaptation of The Secret Garden. But yeah, it was good. If you have young people in your life that are interested in reading LGBT retellings of classics, I'd recommend it, but this just wasn't really the book for me. And then this is a not Indigenous book, but it is one of my most anticipated releases of this year that I got in the mail. And that is Please Do Not Touch This Exhibit, which is a poetry collection, the newest poetry collection, by Jen Campbell. Jen is an author and a booktuber that I actually went back and checked like how long I've been watching Jen's stuff. We've been on YouTube for about the same amount of time, even though all of my videos from that long ago are private now. But yeah, like 7 years ago is when I first started watching Jen's channel, and I have always loved reading her poetry. This one in particular is a lot about her revisiting some of her childhood experiences as a disabled person while going through IVF and trying to become a parent. I read this completely in one sitting, and you know, sometimes you just read something that speaks to you and where you're at your particular stage in life. I'm gonna say this while I continue painting because I think the first coat is dry right now. As somebody that is currently going through like infertility and fertility treatment and all of that kind of thing right now, just reading this book was an incredibly powerful and honestly affirming experience for me. It's one of those things that I love about literature, but also about poetry in particular, is that poetry has this way of just concentrating and distilling very complex and honestly frequently painful human emotions into something that you can really carry with you through those times. That might sound a little bit nebulous, and it kind of is because it's a little bit difficult to articulate, but just I think that there is a lot to be said for, and you know, I've also been like watching a lot of videos and listening to podcasts that are more about like the factual descriptions of people's experiences going through infertility and going through fertility treatments and stuff, and I do find that very helpful, but in a different way than I find this poetic telling of it to be. I find that this is the kind of writing that goes in, speaks to your experience as a human being, and restores a piece of your soul. So I honestly cannot thank you enough, Jen, for writing this book. Again, I know that this book is not about me and my experience. It is a very deeply personal to her story, but at the same time, I think that anyone who has gone through something similar will honestly find a lot in here. I'm getting kind of choked up talking about it, but yeah, having read this book all the way through in a single setting, I'm going to be returning to it after I've left it some time to just percolate and like time to internalize it. I would like to go back through, like I tend to do a lot with my poetry books. Ooh, look, it shows up so much nicer now. Look at that pretty color. I don't know if you can tell, but it's like gold with little green glitter flakes. It's not really showing up great in the light, but I felt like being fancy. Anyway, let me get back on task here. That I would really like to go through and annotate the book. I do that a lot with my poetry books. They always get worn to shreds because I don't just read them once or twice and then forget about them. I reread them and I return to them over and over. But like I said, I'm giving it a little bit of time to sink in. So that's the update on the end of this week in my reading. I have not decided yet what Indigenous book I'm going to start next. I do have several of Sherry Dimoline's books checked out from the library, including one young adult one, which I think I'm going to pass on right now because I'm just realizing that like with my reading tastes and interests changing as I get older, I'm less interested in reading another YA title right this minute. Excuse me. But I still have a couple other of her books. And then this last week is the last week that I am home doing home stuff before we go travel back to visit our families for Thanksgiving. So we're going to see how that goes with book packing because that's always a challenge and we're going to be gone for close to 2 weeks. I can read a lot when I'm on vacation, so I might just wind up bringing my Kindle and maybe 1 or 2 paperbacks
So we'll see, because I feel like lugging hardcover library books that I'm gonna finish pretty quickly if I'm on a plane for 6 hours is not gonna be my most efficient reading idea. But never fear, I have a ton of Indigenous literature that I went through and like scrolled through my Kindle, and I was like, wow, I have a lot on here that fits this reading goal that I haven't even read yet, and it's already downloaded. So I will be revisiting that for sure, and I will see you when I have some more book updates to report.
What you guys doing? Hey there, I realized that it's now December and I didn't actually record kind of an outro for my November reading vlog, so that's what this is going to be today, because I think I just finished 3 other books in November, or like the very beginning of December, that I wanted to talk about, but I was also traveling with my husband to Philadelphia for PAX Unplugged, which is a board game convention there that we love, and also just, you know, to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary, which was also a lot of fun. So I will talk a little bit about the final 3 books that I finished on that trip. First up was Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree. This is the 2nd book after Legends and Lattes, which I believe, technically speaking, it's a prequel, even though the 2nd book, you know, was like chronologically it's a prequel, but it's the 2nd in publication order. And I thought it was just fine. I mean, it was a deeper dive into the character of Viv, who is the orc adventurer that eventually creates Legends and Lattes, the coffee shop, in the 1st book. But I really felt like I didn't necessarily need a prequel that was more of a deep dive into her past or her story. So it's nice if you want like a cozy hangout, and I do think that Travis Baldree's writing has improved since the 1st book. I think that the 2nd book was better written, and I enjoyed reading it more. But at the same time, I feel like I've kind of got what I wanted out of this series of books. I don't know if he intends to write more books in the world or with these particular characters, but as far as the story goes for the characters themselves, I think I'm good. You know, it's fun. It's a fun hangout for what it is, but there's not really a whole lot keeping me there. I think part of the reason for that is just because it is a cozy fantasy, so the idea is that it's going to be lower stakes, and you know, you don't have to worry too much that a main character is going to get killed off or any of the problems are going to be insurmountable or too tragic. But I think that there's just not enough tension there for me to be interested in continuing to read it. So while it was something that I enjoyed reading in the moment while I was reading it, I didn't want to pick it back up very frequently, and I had kind of had to make myself finish it. So I need a little bit more stakes, I think, in my low stakes fantasy. So that was Bookshops and Bone Dust. I also finished reading a book that I have since given away in my romance book club little book swap thing that we did for the holiday, and that was Marry Me by Midnight by Felicia Grossman. It is a historical romance focusing on the Jewish community in London's East End in the early 19th century. It's also a retelling of the Cinderella fairy tale. And again, I thought that this book was just okay. I was really excited about it because I always do love me some good Jewish historical fiction. That's something that I'm particularly interested in, especially in romance. But I think for me, part of the reason this book fell flat was because the male love interest, Aaron, was not as well characterized as Isabel, who was the woman in the relationship. She was very well fleshed out and a great character, and
I really enjoyed the way that her motivations interacted with her desire to be like wanted and loved and cherished for herself, but also feeling like as a woman during this time period, that was neither appropriate for her station nor for her own personal goals. And I really just wanted more out of Aaron, to be honest. I mean, his entire personality seemed to be that he had accepted that he was a schlemiel, which is just a guy that has terrible luck. And that was honestly about it. There were a couple references to like the mice that Cinderella talks to, like in the Disney animated movie. And there was also a few very clever references to the Into the Woods musical, which I saw that. I see what you did there. It was fun. But it just, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's also that I just don't really care for fairy tale retellings much anymore. Like, if I do like reading fairy tale retellings, I want them to be like gruesome and violent. I want them to creep me out. I don't necessarily want them to be the retellings of the Disney versions of the fairy tales, if that makes sense. Now, granted, you know, super violent and gory Cinderella is not exactly what the romance genre is going for here. But, you know, it was fine. I think that I would definitely recommend the book. It just didn't really do a whole lot for me personally, but it was still good. It was still well written. I'd like to try and read something else from this author that isn't a fairy tale retelling. Although I know that there is going to be a second book in this series coming out next year that it seems like maybe it's going the Sleeping Beauty route, if I had to take a guess. So there's that. And then the last book that I finished in the month of November was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by Michelle Williams. I'd heard that that was the way to do it. And at the beginning of the book, Britney Spears talks about how she chose Michelle Williams to narrate the audiobook instead of narrating it herself because of how traumatic it was to write about the different things that she's gone through in her life. And having to relive it for the writing process was enough. She did not want to also have to relive it through the audiobook narration process, which I think was a good choice. It was an interesting choice. And I know that Michelle Williams' impersonation of Justin Timberlake is like making the rounds as a viral clip on social media. I haven't seen this yet, but I can completely understand why that is the thing that has gone viral from this audiobook. This is an interesting book to talk about, and interesting in the sense that I'm not really sure what to make of this book sometimes. I'm gonna have some coffee real quick and collect my thoughts. Because on the one hand, like, it really does feel like Britney Spears' chance to tell her side of the story that we all sort of saw unfold very publicly and in the public eye. And one of the things I've been thinking about a lot recently, I've been thinking about this because of professional and college sports, actually, but it applies here as well, is how many of us are given the grace when we are, 19 years old to not have to fail or be embarrassing or cringy in very public ways, and how we are allowed to make mistakes and grow with relative privacy and anonymity. And how if you are, I was thinking a professional athlete, or in this case, a professional singer who begins their career as a teenager, how you just don't get that. And that was further compounded by the conservatorship that Britney Spears lived under for many years, where her parents, particularly her father, who was massively abusive and controlling, quite literally controlled every aspect of her life. And the things that she talks about and the abuse that she suffered at the hands of her father is honestly quite horrific. I was also thinking about this book in terms of disability justice, in terms of the things that we talk about when we talk about self-determination and independent living, meaning that independence doesn't mean that you can do everything by yourself completely unassisted. Where true independence is being able to have the choices to direct your own care. And for so much of her life, until like very recently, she did not have that choice. So I think that it's peculiar to look at, who Britney Spears is now as somebody that did not really get to have like a regular adolescence or a regular adulthood, and now is getting the chance to kind of have all of that going at once. it's just a bizarre book to think about and talk about, because a lot of the things that she shares almost read like something out of The Yellow Wallpaper, the Charlotte Perkins Gilman short story, where it's this catch-22 of, you know, she is having a very public mental breakdown and a mental health crisis. I'm thinking specifically of in 2006 when, you know, she shaved her head and had this very public breakdown because she was a young person in her early 20s with very young children whose father was not allowing her to see her children and be with her children. And it's very upsetting to like think that somebody went through that mental health crisis, not just because by itself that's upsetting, but also because so many other people in her life were actively doing things to make it worse. And then when you add stuff like the paparazzi and people saying, oh, she's just gone crazy on top of it, it's just so unfair. And I really wish that we lived in a world that did not treat people going through a mental crisis like that, because frankly, we deserve more and we deserve better, like people with mental illness do. I don't know if Brittany considers herself to be a person with a mental illness or a person with a disability, but I really couldn't help reading so much of this book through the lens of disability justice, particularly when it comes to conversations about independent living and self-determination. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting book to read. I'm glad I read it. I think I'll be probably percolating on this for a while, even though I feel like the main new information that you get from this is just her perspective and her side of that story. So I'd say read it if you're interested, and also that the audiobook is great. So those are all of the books mostly that I read and finished in November. By the time this goes up, you'll probably be seeing some of my Vlognica videos where I vlog every day for the holiday of Hanukkah, which begins tonight at the time I'm telling you this. So you'll be seeing some of what I'm reading, a little bit of what I'm like cooking, baking, doing otherwise then. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching this. I've really enjoyed getting to do these more chatty, cozy reading vlogs this year. I think it's been a good decision for me to move away from the pressure of having to upload things weekly or worry about being on a schedule. This just lets me do what I love on BookTube, which is that like free association discussion. And yeah, if you like what you see here and you're not subscribed to the channel already, you know what to do. You just hit subscribe and it'll pop up in your little YouTube drop box, hopefully, every time I post a new video. So as always, thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.